Good afternoon, and welcome to the Faculty Forum Online, a program of the MIT Alumni Association and sponsored in part by MIT's Professional Education. I'm Judy Cole, the EVP of the Alumni Association, and I'll serve as the moderator today. For the alumni who wish to ask a question of our guest, please fill out the form that's on your screen under the webcast. We will try to answer as many of your questions as possible. I'm delighted to be joined today by Dean Ian Waitz. He is Dean of MIT's School of Engineering and the Jerome C. Hunsaker Professor of Aeronautics and Astronautics at MIT. Dean Waitz, thank you very much for being with us today. Of our 134,000 living alumni, a little over 63,000 of them hold degrees from your school. Could you begin by giving the alumni an overview of what the School of Engineering looks like today?
Sure, I would be pleased to. I have some slides that I can present to you, if that's helpful. Maybe we can cue up the slides.
You have the clicker.
It's my job to do that. I should have known. So these slides, maybe can provide just a little bit of context, are just designed to talk about what I think is special about what we do now and historically have done at MIT in engineering. And it shouldn't take too much time, but I think it gives a good perspective on what's special about the school and the directions that we're hoping to go, in some ways that alumni and others can engage with us also. So first, of course, our motto, Mens et Manus, for a very long time, we've focused on making practical change in the world, and we see increasing interest in our students in doing that. So we have right now 130,000 square feet of makerspace on campus for all students, not just the engineering students. And we've been working to make it more accessible to our students and building more. And by more accessible, I mean, common training. So if you get trained on using a 3D printer in one shop, you can use, that same machine in other shops. And we've actually built a little iPhone app called Mobius that helps students connect and maps out all of the makerspaces on campus. We have also 90% of the students participating in UROP, so another long-standing program of MIT. And interestingly, I had a discussion recently with my peer at Stanford, Persis Drell, and she identified our undergraduate participation in research as the largest distinguishing feature from their view of our educational programs at MIT. And I thought about it because it's always interesting to hear from your top peer or competitor what they think is unique and different about you, and it was Europe. And you could think, boy, that's about teaching people to be researchers. Well, no, not really. What it's about is taking students as young as freshmen and putting them shoulder to shoulder with faculty and grad students and postdocs, solving problems that have never been solved before. I mean, that's what research is about. And I think it's part of what builds the culture in our students and our alumni, that sort of no problem is too hard. And it doesn't matter if it hasn't been solved before. So again, that's something that long-standing, much like our focus on making and innovating, that we continue to have very high level of participation in. And I think it leads to this sort of culture within our alumni, which many of you who are watching this are obviously alumni, of really creating new things to solve problems. And we estimate about 30,000 active alumni-based companies for the 134,000 alums that we have. And so that's a pretty productive rate of innovation for any group of alumni, certainly, so something we're proud of. The next slide shows one of the things that we think is special about it. So I talked about what our top peer thought was special about us. We had some discussions within the School of Engineering about what do we think one of our defining characteristics are. And what came out of that was that within MIT we span all the way from the purest, most fundamental sciences all the way to very practical applications. And this image that I put up of the sort of LEGO discovery, it's obviously a artist's rendition of what these two black holes looked like, is sort of emblematic of that. It's this relationship between science and engineering that, 50 years ago started with a classroom discussion and ultimately led to this amazing breakthrough of understanding the very earliest sort of makings of the universe. And I think it's just built on what we have at MIT, which is all the way from science to practical engineering and everything in between. I mean, I think our School of Engineering has many people in it who you would call applied scientists in a lot of other schools. So we really do, in a very smooth way, in a collaborative way, span that whole domain with great strength and depth as well. And I think what's interesting to ask is, what are the next sort of big major breakthroughs? And one of the ones that I'm excited about is quantum computing, and it's a wonderful MIT story also, which I won't have time to tell all the details of, but it began with an MIT alum in 1981, Richard Feynman, obviously Nobel Prize winning physicist who spent most of his career at Caltech, proposing the idea of a quantum computer. And then when you look at the history of quantum computing going forward from that, you have people, for example, Shor here at MIT proposing, well, if you had one, you could use this to break, public key encryption systems. And gradually you have scientists and engineers working collaboratively at MIT and elsewhere to work to build quantum computers. And it's amazing to me, but today juniors in our undergraduate physics laboratory actually use quantum computing to factor very small numbers. And the leading edge of that right now is bringing semiconductor technology to quantum computing, which requires that you're controlling the spins of individual photons and electrons. It's really a major sort of engineering and science feat to do it. But there are many people at MIT that are making very quick work towards that. And I anticipate that perhaps 10 years from now, we will have our first practical quantum computers for, I think, some niche applications initially. But it's very exciting because, then you think about it potentially being used to do things like break the RSA encryption algorithm, which of course is, named, at least after a couple letters in there, of MIT people, an engineer and a scientist. And so it really sort of changing the world by investing in very long, challenging, hard problems. So perhaps in 10 years we'll see practical quantum computing. Another one that I'm excited about, because it just sort of came out of a classroom discussion again last year, is the potential for practical fusion energy. Class discussion that Dennis White in nuclear was holding last year, the students realized that advances in nanotechnology, in particular thin film superconducting materials, could enable a new class of much smaller compact fusion reactors. And now they're off, with a large head of steam to sort of pursue that. And again, it's probably not 10 years away or 20 years away, but it might be interesting if instead of fusion energy always being decades away, we actually do in a few decades get to a point where we can have practical fusion energy. And it would be neat if we could say that at least part of that spawned again from a classroom discussion at MIT, the way the LIGO breakthrough did from its earliest origins. So these are just some examples that I think that capture some of the character of the work that's being done at MIT that's enabled by this very special characteristic that we have of strong collaboration with the School of Science. Another thing that I'll talk about is on the next slide here. And it's things that you might not expect a Dean of Engineering to talk about being special with MIT, and that's that we are a darn good sports school. And you might ask, well, why are you talking about that, Ian? And it's because leadership gets developed in many ways. In working with teams to do projects, it gets developed through sports activities. So the fact that we have a really exceptional Division III athletic program here is something that's very important to me. And in fact, we have 20% of our undergrads play varsity sports. If you compare that to again, our top peers who are all Division I athletic schools, you know, they may have 12% of their students playing varsity sports. So I think it's something that we can really be proud of, is the leadership and teamwork that gets developed through our students participating in really a top flight sports program. And similarly in the arts, half of our undergrads take courses in the arts, and we have some exceptionally talented musicians and visual artists and performing artists among the students. And why is that important to me? Again, because creativity doesn't really know boundaries between arts or engineering or, you know, innovating in science, but it's something that can be applied broadly. So having our students be able to access just exceptional courses in the arts here is very important to me. And another thing that I'm very proud of is the engagement that our students have internationally. 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, we started the MISTY program, where we send students not to schools for a semester, but to sort of real internships in organizations in other parts of the world over the summer. And that first year we sent 20 students abroad. They all went to Japan. In fact, that was, I think, where we had the first relationship. And this year I think we sent 900 or more students abroad. And it's increasing, but already we have 61% of our undergrads involved in international activities. And it's just part of the character now of our undergraduate and our graduate population. They very much want to be engaged internationally. And I think it's just a really nice part of MIT that's changed in the 25 years that I've been here. Another thing that I'm really excited about is what's happening in education with MIT. This is a picture of Han Rungta, who's currently a student at MIT. In fact, he just finished his freshman year. His parents moved from Asia to Florida first when he was 5, I believe, and he began taking courses with OpenCourseWare and took many of those. And then they moved to Cambridge. His father ended up operating one of the eating establishments on campus, and this student would study outside of the cafeteria in Stata. And when he applied to us, he had already taken 55 MITx courses and had not really participated in much formal schooling at that time, and he was 15 years old when we admitted him. And it's just, I think, sort of an interesting example of how much the world is changing through some of the things that MIT's done. I mean, certainly OpenCourseWare is another great example that already has reached 200 million people. So I think this wonderful effort by MIT to reach out to the world with our educational materials, and a lot of that obviously connected to the School of Engineering, is something that I'm very proud of, and it's dramatically changing the way we interact with students on campus as well, because what we're trying to do is enable things that can be commoditized or watched 3 times over on a video to effectively to do it that way, so that we can spend even more time with the students face-to-face doing hands-on projects and things. And 90% of our students now do online problem sets. We just have first approval for a fully online credit-bearing course that our students can take as an experimental pilot, 6002. So we just sent out the email yesterday or the day before to the new crop of students saying, hey, this is possible. I think it's going to be oversubscribed. We're only going to have, I think we're going to limit it to about 30 students who can take it this first time, while we understand the pluses and minuses of it. And I think we'll have many more than that signing up for a fully online credit-bearing course here at MIT. In terms of the initiatives that we have, this lists some of them. We're working very hard to provide more opportunities for students to take ideas they're passionate about and move them forward, whether those would be entrepreneurial ideas or social enterprises or really anything. So we've just started in the last year something called the MIT Sandbox, where We're writing about $2 million a year in checks to our students for any innovative idea to help them move it forward. We're doing that in partnership with a lot of very supportive alums and companies who've contributed the money and who serve on the funding board and provide guidance and mentoring and advice to these student teams. But it's just very, very exciting. It's everything from new technologies to help with Alzheimer's patients communicate, to carbon nanotubes put into the pores of plant leaves to turn these plants into sensors, to even designer pasta, believe it or not. So a wide range of really neat, innovative ideas coming from the MIT students, accessible to all 11,000 students, not just engineers. So we're working hard to provide more opportunities for experiences like that for our students while they're here at MIT. We're increasingly moving to make the learning environment more flexible and tailored. And as I mentioned, moving to more online modes of delivery where it's appropriate and helpful. We've begun to consider a new school-wide degree. We already have flexible majors in about half the engineering departments where the students design their own areas of concentration. We're continuing to strengthen our industrial and professional training opportunities like the undergraduate practice opportunities program. So there's a lot happening educationally as well. In terms of major initiatives, we're working, of course, on health and energy and the environment. We have a food and water initiative. And we have 3 new cross-MIT organizations, one in medical engineering and science, one in data systems and society, and the other is a toolbox in nano characterization and fabrication called MIT Nano, which is our largest capital project on campus. So a lot of exciting things happening in the school, and we're excited to have more participation from alumni in these activities. There's a lot of ways to get involved. One is through serving as a mentor. I mentioned the Sandbox program or other things related to entrepreneurial endeavors. We are always looking for mentors from a wide variety of backgrounds and experiences to work with our students, and I can help provide connections for that. There are opportunities for interacting with us through any company you would work with. Our undergraduate practice opportunities program provides hundreds of internships a year for our students. There are externship opportunities that the Alumni Association and others host that happen during IAP, which are great ways to connect with students. And obviously a lot of our alumni get involved in helping to interview students who would be admitted to MIT potentially, or work in things like our Office for Engineering Outreach programs, which just does amazing work. And just in general, helping to share or spread the word about the wonderful opportunities at MIT. I still think that we're the very best place in the world to get a education in science and engineering. It really is a wonderful place, and I think it's getting better year after year in many ways with the help and partnership of alumni. So thank you for that, and certainly if people would like to get involved, I'd be happy to connect you with many more opportunities to do so.
Thank you very much, Ian. That's wonderful and really inspirational what's going on in the School of Engineering. While the questions come in from our alumni, I would like to start with one of my own.
Sure.
About asking about the class of 2020, and I believe they just started classes yesterday,
They did?
if I'm not mistaken. What is unique about this entering class, and what excites you about the kinds of students that MIT is enrolling now?
Yeah, so unique. I think the class continues, each year it gets stronger and stronger, and you almost don't believe that it can when you look at the statistics and just tremendous diversity and strength in the class. But that's not unique. I mean, that's been happening sort of year after year after year. It just keeps getting better, in my opinion. What excites me about the class is that students coming to college today across the world, across the US, but especially at MIT, are very much outwardly focused on solving the world's problems. And they really do identify with challenge areas as much as they'll identify with particular professions of engineering. So we have as many students who will come to us and say, I want to work on energy or health or poverty, as will come to us and say, I want to be a chemical engineer or a mechanical engineer, so that there's really a focus that they come to us with of problems that they want to work on. And many of those students now are within our flexible degree programs, where they can sort of become a mechanical engineer but with a focus on energy, or a chemical engineer with a focus on health, things like that. So they're very much motivated by trying to make social change in the world. That's exciting because it's fun to work with these talented kids. And they're still, I think MIT admissions does a wonderful job. Yeah. I mean, I just have to,
it has to be a hard job to do,
credit,
too.
Well, huge credit to Stu Schmill and his whole team for how they compose a class. The people are not just individually excellent, but they're collectively excellent as a class, so that the dimensions of the class, that you look at the diversity that it has within it across, cultural backgrounds and gender and, socioeconomic backgrounds and interests in different things, in the arts and music and athletes. It's just impressive. I mean, I'll give you an example. So I'm a freshman advisor. I have one of my freshmen took 5 years off after high school. So he's just starting after a 5-year hiatus from high school. But what did he do in those 5 years? Well, he just created and sold a successful company. And so here's this guy who went off as a high school student, and
wow.
And it had, I don't know, close to $50 million in venture capital funding in it, and he just successfully sold it to Mercedes-Benz, in fact, and now he's at MIT to start. I have another student, and she has gone to an arts school, but also exceptionally talented, as you would expect, in math and science and things like that. But she is an amazing musician, and has already had a movie that she's scored been released. And I thought, really? I mean, come on, you just,
what are they going to do
just
for
out
a
of high
second
school,
act?
So so what am I excited about with these students? Well, the class as a whole is remarkable and excellent, and it just gets better and better every year. But the way you really get excited is you sit down and you talk to these students and you say, wow, really? That's what you're capable of? And so to me, it's just exciting to work with them. I mean, sometimes I think it's not so much that what we help them with here, but maybe we just provide the conditions for them to do the great things they're going to do, and then we get out of their way, because they really are an exceptional group of students, individually and collectively.
Yeah, I think that I concur completely.
I'm really excited about our students.
Yeah. Another question I always wonder about is, with MIT sitting at the top of nearly all of the world's college ranking lists, as do several of the individual departments within your school, that puts a big target on our backs for our competitors. What worries you most about MIT's competition, and what keeps you up at night?
Well, we collaborate a lot with our peers and competitors as well, but of course, where the competition really is for talent. So it's when, MIT, Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, Yale all identify that exceptional student that we think would do marvelously at our institutions, and do they come to MIT or not, and why do they come to MIT or not, right? And so, same thing at the grad level. Competing for graduate students is very, very competitive, and faculty as well. Every hire we make, other people are making offers to that person as well, and we have to make sure that what we provide here at MIT, the educational environment, the research environment, is one where the people really feel that, hey, this is the best place in the world for me. And it's all about the people. And of course, you have to have the facilities and things like that for them. But if anything causes you to stop attracting great people, you will quickly lose the reputation and attention that you have from national rankings. So the national rankings are just a reflection of largely of what sort of people think about you, and that's based on really how are you doing in attracting people. So my great worry is that with a couple of our peers out fundraising us on a per capita basis by a significant amount. So, you know, Stanford and Harvard, it's not any great surprise which schools are doing exceptionally well with fundraising, is that we have to be more and more thoughtful and strategic in where we make our investments so that we can continue to keep this a really great place for people and attract great people. So yeah, the world is getting more and more competitive, and some of our top peers who have exceptional programs are you know, very, very effective at fundraising. And you know, it means that, one, we've got to also, you know, up our game in fundraising, and we're doing that. But it just means we have to be very thoughtful about where we place our bets.
Are there specific peers to whom to which we lose people? I mean,
oh yeah, our top competitors are just, you know, the schools like, you know, Stanford and Harvard and Princeton and Yale. And then when you look at the grad level, it's a different set of schools because it's very dependent on what the particular research area is.
Right.
So at the undergrad level, you tend to compete school to school,
mm-hmm.
or at least, you know, engineering program to engineering program. And similarly for science and management and HAS and things like that. But at the graduate level, it's really research group to research group.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe lab to lab.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's really at that level of more of a local scale. And there, you know, you can find exceptional research groups at most universities. Depending on what the student is interested in, you can have a much wider range of competitors. But still, the single largest competitor that we have for graduate student talent is Stanford,
mm-hmm.
And as well for undergrad talent at Stanford and Harvard. So those are the places that we really pay attention to. And it's okay if they're attracting you know, great students. What we want to do is make it so that the students who could be most successful, or we would be most excited about, will come to MIT. But not all students is MIT their thing, and so it's not that we want to have all the top students in the same view that they have, but we want to make sure that the students who would really succeed and be contributors to MIT, you know, are ones that we attract. So yeah, we focus a lot on how do we do that.
It seems like we're doing that
we're
with
doing,
the description of the class.
We're doing pretty well. There are areas where, you know, again, it's my job to worry about these things where I'd like us to be doing better, right?
So I think we ought to get to the alumni questions.
Sure.
Walt in Lockport, New York
Walt.
asks, is there a need for a course covering engineering fundamentals balanced with management to support a career in management of technical programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know, one of the structures at MIT that's hard to change, and for both good reasons and bad reasons, I think, is our General Institute requirements. Mm-hmm. It's something that everyone at MIT feels they own, so it's hard to sort of change it. But there was an effort, you know, maybe a decade ago, to look at sort of revising those in a way that would add, potentially, one of the proposals was a course that would be essentially a General Institute requirement in engineering, you know, just loosely described. That was ultimately not successful. And the way that we've been addressing that now is by having obviously sort of fundamentals introduced in each of the departments, and then what we would call professional skills, communications, teamwork, leadership skills, negotiation, things like that, captured within the formal curriculum in some of the junior and senior level classes, but also in some of the sophomore classes, but then also through extracurriculars. So I mentioned in the slides this undergraduate practice opportunities program. That's a program where we partner with people from, you know, dozens and dozens of companies who come and spend a week at MIT.
Many of them alumni.
Yeah, many of them alumni, and educate our students on these professional skills. And it's entirely a vote with your feet program. The students don't have to take a week of their time over IAP or over spring break to do it. But about half of all MIT undergrads vote with their feet into it because they all see that, hey, if I'm going to be successful in the world, these are tools that I need to have. So right now, I think we're in a reasonably good position with providing some of those skills to most of our students. It's sort of 2/3 of engineering majors, in fact, sort of vote with their feet to participate in UPOP. And then there's other ways that they, similar sort of extracurricular activities that they can participate in. But it's a good question. We've decided to address it not with a single dedicated course, but with elements in a variety of courses, plus some very strong popular extracurricular activities.
Excellent. Ralph at Virginia Tech asks, given the new IDSS program, I'm interested in hearing how you think SES will continue the legacy of the Technology Management and Policy program. As you may know, many TMP graduates currently have senior leadership positions in government and academia.
Yeah, so let me, thank you for the question. I'll sort of sort out some of the acronyms there. So IDSS is the Institute for Data Systems and Society, which is one of the new organizations. It's a year old. Its launch is in another couple weeks. It's public launch. And it's really focused on bringing together people who work on sort of challenging sort of socio-technical problems with rigorous analytical tools and data, with social scientists. It involves all 5 schools at MIT. And within that is a new degree program that we just launched called the SES PhD degree. And there's also within the Technology and Policy program, master's degree program, and there's a new center for statistics and data science that's part of it. So that sort of sets what this IDSS is. And all the faculty in it are dual key appointments with other departments in multiple schools across MIT. So it really is an all MIT organization. And this question of sort of technology and policy management program, there are pieces of the former ESD which are in IDSS that we're working to figure out, well, how do we now make them their own within IDSS? And those are some of the areas that we're still working on, in particular on the dimension of things that relate to policy. We're trying to figure out, well, how do we build these strong partnerships and get the engagement of sort of colleagues from across MIT who are interested in policy and things related to policy like political science. So that is still a work in progress, I would say, just to be honest about it. We don't have our ducks in order in terms of those programs yet, as we're just really early in trying to build a culture of this community and what it will do.
Well, that's a fair answer. I mean, there are a lot of things at MIT that are a work in progress.
Yeah, well.
Larry in Darien, Connecticut asks, can you talk about the new MicroMaster's degree in supply chain management being offered this year? What are your hopes for the program?
So the MicroMasters, for those who aren't aware of them, is a concept where we would have students take a package of courses online from around the world. So potentially a very large cohort of thousands and thousands of students would take classes, and then they would apply to MIT for something called a MicroMasters. And if they were successful in gaining admission to MIT, then those classes they took online would be used towards that degree. But they would still come to MIT and take additional classes at MIT. But you know, this online work ahead of time would sort of reduce the amount of time that they would have sort of on-site at MIT completing the degree. And so we launched one of those in a program in transportation and logistics and supply chain management, sort of broadly those areas. And I think the person who's doing it, I occasionally get phone calls and emails from, it's Professor Yossi Sheffi. I think it's sort of like the dog who caught the bus. That I mean, it's a really exciting direction to move, but it's a much harder problem to sort of launch it and have all the staff to make it successful and things. So well, we're still learning. We're off and running with it. In fact, we've got proposals for a couple other ones that are in the works that I hope will be announced in the next year. So we're committed to trying these things, but I think we're also learning that it's a lot harder to pull those off than maybe we initially imagined. But we're going to do it. I mean,
another
it's
one
sort
of those works in progress.
Yeah, work in progress, but that's a really exciting one.
Yeah. Seth in New York asks, can you talk about what your school is doing to protect startups' intellectual property while students are on campus?
So one of the things that we weren't very effective with in the past was really providing mentoring to any student who would need it. Now, mentoring exists for them at MIT related to startups, but they had to sort of reach out and find it. And the Innovation Initiative is doing a wonderful job of mapping all of these resources for the students, whether it's the physical makerspaces or the mentoring opportunities. So for example, in this sandbox program, all the intellectual property, unless it's constrained by some federal contract or something like that, it is held by the students, even though we're giving them significant funding. So we have a policy decision that nope, that's going to be theirs. But more importantly than that, because we've sort of built this program that connects the students with mentoring and a little bit of funding, we can make sure that all the students who are interested in moving these innovative ideas forward have access to the advice. So we have a law clinic that they can access. We have a variety of levels of mentors who engage with students at different amounts of time, depending on the stage of the students' ideas. And we're now providing a map so that they can connect to those resources, as well as actively doing the connections through programs like Start MIT that we've created, which is sort of an entrepreneurship boot camp, through the Trust Center, which is sort of a marvelous place, through the Sandbox program. And we're beginning to work more effectively together across programs like that too. So I think we're doing a better job to give students the guidance and advice. And certainly if it's something that's not constrained by a contract or a grant, for example, with a graduate student, we work very hard to sort of protect those student ideas.
That's great. That's really great. So Jim in Sacramento says that he met you at the NASA conference on aviation emissions. Aircraft CO2 emissions are a big problem owing to the multiple forcing at maybe 2.4 times CO2 emissions. Any new insights?
So that's a research question for me. So I brought 55 minutes of charts that I'd like to present. So yeah, I think the new insight there that I have is that the aviation industry broadly and governments around the world have recognized that we really do have to take action on that. And that's, I think, the greatest step forward, because there are a lot of things that we can do to incentivize the right kinds of action through more effective policies and to design more efficient, lower emission aircraft. But you really do have to have incentives and policies put in place to make some of that happen. And the sort of recent work by International Civil Aviation Organization to sort of take some first steps towards carbon neutral growth and things like that in the years ahead, I think are really a good step. So I'm very optimistic about our ability to make some progress on that. So a lot of work ahead, but you're beginning to see the policies and the incentives line up so that you'll see industry and airlines following along. I think everyone realizes it's something that we have to work on. So yeah, and thanks for the research question. It's nice to get one.
So that answer was a great segue to the next question, which is about the convergence of engineering and science. Amy in Cambridge asked, does it worry you that no federal agency has a mandate to think about convergence of engineering and sciences? Will this have to be a bottom-up movement before Congress or the executive acts?
Wow, that's a great question. I wouldn't say that I'm worried about it, but there are these ebbs and flows that you see, where also you find, basic funding going down and people investing in nearer term, let's call it more engineering or innovation focused or practical focused funding. And and that's sort of where we are now. There's been more of a focus on near-term funding, and the School of Engineering has, very healthy research portfolio, but the funding for some of the basic sciences is not as strong. And I think that's a really short-sighted view because it doesn't recognize the whole sort of spectrum of collaborations and interactions that actually go in both directions, with sort of engineering advancing science and science advancing engineering. And at MIT, it's just a completely porous boundaries, and it's one of the things that people don't even think about here very much. And so the fact that things are a little bit balkanized within the funding agencies around those topics, I think is a source of some of these, let's say, not appropriate ebbs and flows, or ebbs and flows that if you could control them a little bit differently would be better. So yeah, I think that's a good question. I haven't thought about it being sourced to the fact that we don't have a single sort of federal agency with oversight over that convergence. But I think that's a really interesting observation.
Yeah, it sort of feels like the government hasn't caught up with the way in which the world is changing.
Yeah, well, that's not a surprise.
Yes. So I think this is our last question. Xiang in Hayward, California asks, how do fusion and quantum at MIT find mainstream funding from industry?
So through a lot of hard work. In quantum, there are some applications which, for sensors and things like that are fairly near term, and I think that we will see increasingly funding from the sort of industry sort of space in that area because it's getting close enough. Fusion energy, that's tougher, right? I mean, you really are talking, even if you can be successful with long-term compact fusion energy, you're talking about something that's a couple decades in development, and yeah, that is harder to convince industry to participate in. It can even be very hard to convince government to participate in. We have actually a set of alums who are working hard to help us with that, to put together coalitions of interested companies and investment groups and alums who would like to help with that very particular problem. But yeah, very long-term development like that can be a challenge to get launched and funded. But we work hard at it. In
the past, it used to be the government that would make those investments through places like MIT.
Yep, and that's getting tougher and tougher.
It is.
Yeah.
So I think that is about all the time we have. On behalf of the MIT Alumni Association, thank you very much, Dean Waitz.
My pleasure.
This was great, and it was a fascinating conversation. Thank you to our alumni for your excellent questions. If we did not get to yours, we will pass it on to Dean Waitz after the webcast. Please share other questions or comments on Twitter using hashtag MIT Better World. You can also view an archive of past faculty forums online by visiting the Learn section on the Alumni Association website. And please join us again next month for another session of Faculty Forum Online.